Cool deal.
I'm starting your timer right now. You have 10 minutes.
Excellent. All right. So first, I'd like to start off by defining deism as I'm arguing against it today. Deism believes in an impersonal God who created the universe and left it and does not sustain the universe. I'm not positively arguing for why God gives revelation or does miracles, but I am actually arguing for why God sustains the universe, as deism rejects that God sustains the universe. First, I'd like to say that there are two ways that things are preserved. There are two ways that something can be preserved or kept from ceasing to exist: indirectly or accidentally. This happens when something is protected from destruction by external means. For example, a child is preserved from harm if someone prevents them from falling into a fire. In this way, God sometimes preserves things from destruction, but not all things require this kind of preservation, since some things are incorruptible by nature. There is also directly or essentially as a means of preservation, and this applies when something depends entirely on another for its very existence. In such cases, if the cause stopped acting, the thing would immediately cease to exist. All created things fall into this category. They only exist because God actively maintains them. Without God's continued action, all things would vanish instantly. There's also a difference between becoming and being. Every effect depends upon its cause, but in different ways. Some causes only bring things into existence, but do not need to sustain them afterward. For example, a builder constructs a house, but once built, the house remains standing due to the nature of its materials, wood, stone, cement, etc., not because the builder keeps working on it. Similarly, a cook heats food, but the food stays warm for a while even after being removed from the fire. However, other causes must continuously act to keep something in existence. For example, light in the air depends entirely on the presence of the sun. If the sun's light disappears, the air immediately becomes dark. Unlike the house, which remains standing due to its structure, light in the air does not persist on its own, but is entirely dependent on an external source. God is the kind of cause that must sustain his creation constantly, not just bring it into being and leave it to exist independently. If God stopped sustaining something, it would return to nothingness, just as air would immediately become dark if sunlight disappeared. To further clarify this idea, the text gives the following example: fire and heat. Water can absorb and retain heat from fire. Even after the fire is removed, the water remains warm for a while. This is because water has the capacity to hold the heat, even if imperfectly. In contrast, air does not retain light once the sun is gone. The moment sunlight disappears, darkness immediately takes over because light has no root in the air itself. This is used as an analogy for creation. Creatures do not contain existence within themselves as a permanent property. They need God's continual presence to remain in being. If he withdrew his sustaining power, they would instantly cease to exist, just as the air loses light when the sun is gone. Deism assumes that God is the cause of the, quote, becoming of the universe and not its being necessarily. Why? Because if God were the source of existence, being itself, then subsequently, God would be the sustainer of the universe, as existence itself simultaneously depends on him. One cannot be both the sustainer, one giving the substance, and the one being sustained. Things cannot sustain their own being, and only their becoming, because they are not the source of their own being. Ultimately, like I said, the focus of this debate is about God's relation in terms of sustaining the universe. I am arguing positively against this watchmaker sort of idea that deism holds to. Deism being a proponent of a impersonal, inactive God cannot possibly be the case, as I've laid out here in my previous argument. So just to reiterate, I'm not talking about miracles. I'm not talking about revelation. What we're talking about is a fundamental sustaining of being rather than an act of creation in and of itself. And, I appreciate you guys inviting me up here for this. It's good to have an opportunity to debate this. I'm looking forward to see what Bubba has to say in response. But I think, let me go over my notes here and see if that's all that I have for this. That's going to be it. The last thing I'd like to say for my last part is I appreciate Apophatic for helping me prep and study for the debate. Sources such as the Summa Theologiae were excellent and informative. They were edifying, not beyond the bounds of this conversation. So I really appreciate it. And y'all check out Apophatic because he's a good guy, does good work. That's going to do it for my opening.
Cool. Thank you for the opening. Let me reset this real fast. Let me know when you're ready, Bubba, and I'll start your timer for your introduction.
Yep. 3, 2, 1, go.
Your timer starts now.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Hi, Sapphires, Taco, people on YouTube, people on Discord, and thanks Taco for hosting. This will be my third formal debate on the server, and thanks again Sapphire for accepting the debate. I'm not sure if I thank you for it yet. And I have Sapphire, someone who I have a large amount of respect for. He's one of the first people that I actually met and talked to when I joined the server about a year ago. He's a much more worthy opponent, I believe, than my last opponent, and I intend to treat him with a high level of respect, and I hope that it's returned in kind. I don't intend to bitch him out or call him names, and I hope that he understands when I'm throwing banter at him. The position, of course, that I'm saying is that God created the universe, and he is impersonal to his creation. In other words, God does not interfere or have a relationship with his creation. That's important to establish that the topic of the debate is, what is relationality? When we define something that is relational or personal, that would mean that we have a being that you can interact with and have a relationship with. God, the creator, as it's understood in Deism, has only the natures which are necessary for him to have, which I'm going to make very clear, and write this down if you want to follow along. The necessary qualities for God to be the creator of the universe are going to be 4 things. And he's be atemporal and immaterial. In other words, God created time and space, therefore he has to exist outside of time and space. He has to have the ability of creation, whatever that entails, because whatever God did to create the universe, he has to have the ability to do it. He has to have a mind or a consciousness, and I don't want to get into the depths of the cosmological argument because then that would be a completely separate category of debate. But the reason, in short, for the necessity of God having a mind or a consciousness would be the cosmological argument. And of course, the 4th thing, which is the topic of the debate, is he is impersonal. As far as deism goes, God must be a being which we can't possibly have a personal relationship with, because God exists outside of time and space. It is impossible for us to access beings or a being or beings which exist outside of time and space. All of the ways which people claim, and Sapphire said that we're not really going to discuss this, but all the ways in which people claim to communicate with God in a theistic worldview, with a personal God, I view as arbitrary, and they're more like a conditioned belief or a behavior, like prayer and divine revelation. Ways that you say that you can communicate with God, but there is no empirical evidence of said things. What I know is going to frustrate some people, probably even Sapphire, is the concept which deism holds about every other possible nature of God, which I'm just straight up agnostic to. If Sapphire or anyone else in the Q&A asks me questions like, is God all powerful, or is God all knowing, is God all omnipresent, is he this, is God that, I'm going to respond with a very honest and very straightforward, I don't know. It's not necessary for him to have any of these qualities, but he could be, but he does not need to be. And Sapphire, of course, believes that God is personal. And we achieve this access, and that we achieve all access to the true state of reality through God, which is the divine revelation, which we're not debating divine revelation, but that's how we have access to the true state of affairs. And it's through God because of his relational nature. He believes this that all truths from physics, logic, mathematics, morality, you name it, all of it in his worldview is revealed to us by God. What Sapphire told me and Taco building up to this debate is that he was going to run the tag argument. That's why I'm bringing this up, the precept argument. So what I'm going to make clear right here and right now is that the only necessary precondition for me to make truth claims about reality is that I need to have access to the true state of reality. In other words, so that applies to things like logic and physics and mathematics and so on. In other words, what that means is that the reason that I'm able to rationally make claims about logic and mathematics and so on is because I have access to logic and mathematics and so on. And then the next question in the tag argument would be, how do you know that you have access to the true state of reality? This would be because I trust that my rationale and my sense perception are really perceiving reality. And so that means that I trust my senses. They're not lying to me about what I'm seeing and what I'm rationalizing my way into believing. Sapphire would be correct, by the way, in saying that this reasoning is circular, because I'm essentially saying that I trust in my sense perception because it is trustworthy. However, that's kind of the point, because in my time for questioning, I'm going to ask Sapphire some questions leading up to a point-blank issue of, how do you know that your revelation of the true state of reality is trustworthy? Which I'm going to see what he responds with, because I'm going to ask him that question at point blank at some point. The reason I'm asking is because in order to poke holes in my deistic worldview, we would have to internally show why God must be relational, why it is necessary in order for us to obtain things like knowledge. And if he understands everything that I've said up to this point about logic and knowledge and so on, then he must break down where's the logical contradiction in this type of view. What my line of questioning is looking to show is that Sapphire and I are saying, or we actually believe in the same thing, but just by different means. And which I promise to make very clear when it comes to my line of questioning. And yeah, that's going to concede the rest of my time.
Cool. Thank you for the introduction. Now, the affirmative cross-exam is going to begin when you're ready. You'll have 30 minutes for that. Once again, make sure that on the affirmative, you're maintaining control of your time. If it's going off topic or whatever, feel free to take back your time. And then do your best to answer questions directly and concisely. And we'll do the same thing on the negative cross-exam. Sapphire, whenever you're ready, let me know, and I'll start your 30-minute timer.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, your mic broke up there for a second, but you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Cool. All right, I'm starting your timer right now. You have 30 minutes.
Alrighty. So, Bubba, first and foremost, just as a quick statement to outline it, my argument is positively against the deistic worldview, and in terms of how God is relational. It's not about divine revelation, and I'm not going into tag. It's about the sustaining of the universe. So my first question to you would be, do you actually believe in a God that sustains the universe? How would that work, given that your God is impersonal?
I believe that the creator of the universe is what we would define as a deity, which deity, of course, means God. So yes, I do believe in a God, and I believe that he's impersonal. And are you asking why I believe that?
The follow-up question would, how would that God sustain the universe? And how would that be possible if your God is impersonal?
I believe that the universe is self-sustaining. Like, I believe that the way that the scientists describe the Big Bang and the way that rapid outward expansion, just through when the universe had a point in which it all began, both physically and in time, is accurate. You know, I appeal to the consensus of the scientists, which know this stuff.
So your argument is that when God created the universe, he instituted some sort of sustaining principle with the creation.
I'd say so. If it's possible, so it's possible that the universe one day is going to break apart into a million pieces because gravity wasn't finely tuned the correct way. But so far, over the course of billions of years, that hasn't happened yet.
So how does that not just kick the can down the road? Because If God created the universe with a sustaining principle, then wouldn't that mean God is sustaining the sustaining principle, thus interacting with the creation?
The reason why it could be classified as kicking the can down the road is because it's not necessary, and when we're defining a creator God, to say that it's self-sustaining, that the universe must be self-sustaining. It's just that it is necessary for the creation of the universe that God had the ability to create it.
But that was your response to the whether or not how God creates the universe. You said he created it with a self-sustaining principle.
I said it's possible. It's possible that the universe actually isn't self-sustaining, and in 10 billion years from now, gravity is going to fly all out of proportion, and we're all going to break apart into a million pieces. It's possible, but so far we're fine. So far that hasn't happened.
But remember, like I said in my opening statement, a thing can only sustain itself in its becoming, but not in its being, right? Because the being of a thing deals with its form or with its essence. So the issue that we're having here is that you can describe via science or whatever mechanism you'd like to, a how and a sort of physical creation, like I said, builder building the house. But the fact of the matter is that the being of the thing is not sustained by the builder itself.
Right.
So,
And the example that you used of the builder building the house, take the universe to be like the house. The house will stand on its own for hundreds of years, even if we were to never touch it. The builder doesn't have to interact with the house in order for it to stay in its structure. It could, don't get me wrong, it could, and this works in my paradigm because the house eventually, the bricks and the steel and the wood will eventually decay over hundreds, maybe thousands of years. But the fact is, the house can self-sustain itself for a long period of time.
now again, the builder is only the cause of the becoming, unlike God, who directly causes its being. So not specifically the house, but God, being the creator, directly causes the being of the creation. Whereas the builder, being the builder, he causes the becoming of the building, but he is not the sustainer of the essence of the building.
Yeah, I'd say you're right. Like the structure of the building is made by the nature of the building itself.
Because remember, I outlined two modes of preservation: accidental and indirect,
Yep.
and direct, essential preservation.
And yeah, what about it? It's like, I'm not sure how, and I'm not sure how it relates though. Like, sure, in the case of the house and the builder building the house, which of those are, what's being used there? Is it indirect or is it accidental, as you're trying to say?
Directly. This applies when something depends entirely on another thing for its very existence.
Sure.
If the cause stopped acting, the thing would immediately cease to exist. All created things fall into this category. They only exist because God actively maintains them. Without God's continual action, the things would vanish instantly. That's my definition there for direct.
Yeah, I just don't see that it's necessary that God needs to sustain his own creation in order for his creation to be sustained. I think that the universe can sustain itself, even if it's for a finite amount of time. It still sustains itself nonetheless.
Nothing can sustain its own being. It can sustain the becoming of the being.
The building of the example that we use. I don't want to ask you questions in your time, but so I'll just assert that the building in the building. So when the builder builds a building, that's a tongue twister, will sustain itself until it eventually decays and falls apart, unless it's maintained.
So again, God cannot grant to a creature to be preserved in a being after the cessation of the divine influence. He can't make it to not have received its being from himself. Right? That would violate the law of non-contradiction, which you do subscribe. Well, you do subscribe that because it's a contradiction. You do subscribe to objective logic, right?
Well, I think that
logic is objective.
I think that logic is what you would call transcendental, but it's a descriptive idea which we use to describe the universe. So we could.
But it's objective. It's discoverable. Because I also believe
yes.
that's transcendental. So
Yes.
if logic being objective is incontrovertible, if it's objective, then that would necessitate that the laws of logic, as we know them, as we've discovered them, would be incontrovertible. So you would have to adhere to the law of non-contradiction. You can't have God create a thing that is not sustained by him, because he can't create a thing to not have been created by him.
Right, but I don't see where the contradiction is in deism under that principle.
Because God is the source of all being, even in deism.
Yeah, God is the source, kind of like the Watchmaker or the prime mover. And I don't, however, means that I think that logic, for example, is self-sustaining. Like, logic is an objective truth, which can't really be broken in that way. And it doesn't need God to sustain it for it to be true.
But if he's the source of all being, then he has to continually act to maintain the being. Even if it's just a sustaining principle, like I said earlier, we've kicked the can down the road. What sustains the sustaining principle?
Are you asking what sustains God?
No, you said in my previous question, your response was that when God created the world, that he created it with a sustaining principle. But I mentioned that just kicks the can down the road. So the question is, what would be sustaining the sustaining principle?
I think that it is possible for either the universe to be sustaining itself for eternity, or for one day the universe to fall apart and to not be able to sustain itself anymore, much like the building. The building will either exist eternally, which unlikely, of course, or it will fall apart at one point. And I believe that the universe will fall apart. I personally believe that the universe will fall apart at one point, but it's unknown as to when.
And now, is that because the sustainer ceases to act? Because remember, the sustaining principle falling apart would imply that.
It could, but the important part is that it's not necessary as to whether or not God is relational.
No, it is, because that is a God that is contrary to the claim of deism as a whole, being impersonal and not interacting with the creation. If he does in fact sustain the creation, then that would violate this sort of deistic foundation. But on top of that, back to my question about sustaining, because that's really the crux of my entire argument here. It seems to me that it's necessarily the case that if the thing that is sustaining, whether it is God or this sustaining principle, ceases to sustain the thing, then the thing itself ceases. It's incoherent to assert that a thing can exist the thing being sustained can exist apart from the thing sustaining it.
And that's where I just reject that premise, just because under the necessary qualities which I gave to God in my opening statement, it's necessary for God to have the power of creation. It's necessary for God to have a mind, and it's necessary for God to exist outside of time and space. That's it. The creation doesn't need to be sustained, and in order for God doesn't need to have a relationship with its creation in order for the creation to be sustained. And I just reject that premise on the basis that that's not the necessary preconditions for any creator who creates a being, which at worst is a black swan fallacy, but which still is logical nonetheless.
Everything that has being simultaneously demands on God for their existence, or depends on God for their existence. So the problem that I'm having here is I don't think you're seeing how the incoherence of your worldview here with this. The problem is not about whether or not, God created the world with a sustaining principle or God directly sustains it. Under your worldview, it is necessary that the God created the world, wound it up like a watch, and then set it off onto its own course. The problem with that is that God is the being that is necessary. It is the necessary cause for the effect of creation. Every effect depends upon its cause. Without the cause being maintained, what happens to the effect?
Can you kind of rephrase that question?
Well, that was me rephrasing it, because it goes back to the thing that is sustained is dependent upon the sustainer. And under your worldview, if the sustainer is a sustaining principle that God, this Watchmaker God, built into the fabric of the universe when he created it, that doesn't resolve the issue. It just kicks the can down the road, because it is necessary that the sustaining principle itself would be sustained by something. Every cause has its effect. You would agree with that, right? Every cause has its effect?
Every cause has its effect. Yeah, I do. But I think
every effect would be dependent on its cause, right?
Every effect would be dependent on its cause. Yes, but I think what the misunderstanding here is that you're trying to assert to me that God sustaining his creation is necessary. And I'm saying it's not necessary, which is why I don't believe, and that's the whole idea. You're trying to say that because God needs to be relational to his creation, and when he's relational, he's sustaining his creation. I'm saying that it's not necessary. It's totally possible that the creation will fall apart into a billion million pieces, but what that entails is that it's still not necessary, which is the title of the debate.
Unfortunately, that's a straw man, and like I said in my opening, like I said, I gave the reasoning for why God needs to sustain. I didn't just say that it's necessary. I appealed to a shared belief in objective logic. I appealed to a shared belief that every cause has its effect and that every effect is dependent on its cause. And now I'm demonstrating the incoherence of stating that just because you don't know that the universe could fall apart, that what I'm saying is the reason why the universe would fall apart is as if the necessary sustaining component, the God, ceases to act on the creation. And the reason why that's a problem for your deistic worldview is because you claim that God does not interact with the creation.
And yeah, I don't see as to why God must interact with his creation in order for it to sustain itself, if that's what you're saying. And the same way that most creations that beings make are self-sustaining. Like in the Watchmaker, the builder building the building, like I'm saying I've been very consistent with the point that like the universe could eventually fall apart and not be able to sustain itself at some point. All that proves is that God made a creation which wasn't sustainable, which wasn't self-sustainable.
Remember, I outlined two different modes of preservation, though. The
indirect and direct.
Indirect accidental, or the essential and direct, right?
Yeah. And you would be saying that God is essential. God is not essential under deism, but he is essential under theism and a relational God. And what you're providing to me right now is an external critique, which isn't going to really find any contradictions in my belief. It's just more or less going to be asserting yours onto mine.
Well, again, what I'm critiquing here, what I'm critiquing here. It's an internal critique. We're asking for an internal critique, and what I'm critiquing here is that, like I said in my opening statement, that God is the sustainer of the universe, unlike in the deistic worldview, where God does not sustain the universe. Rather, the deistic worldview leads to God being the cause of the becoming rather than being the creator or the cause of the being itself. So again, it's not about just interaction. It's about sustaining, but the sustaining is in and of itself an interaction. And again, you're still not contending with the issue here as far as the fact of the matter of something like a house falling apart 100 years, 200 years, whatever, after the builder builds it. That's because the cause of the becoming of the building has ceased. It's because the cause of the being itself is not being sustained. That's because the thing that is sustained is dependent upon the thing sustaining it. Every cause has its effect. Every effect is dependent upon its cause.
I don't believe that this argument works, because that would be implying that several builders could be the thing that are sustaining the building, right?
But remember, some causes only bring things into existence, but do not need to sustain them afterwards. The builder building the house example. Not because the builder keeps working on it. Similarly, a cook heats food, but the food stays warm for a while after it's removed from the fire. That would be the indirect accidental preservation. However, other causes must continuously act to keep something in existence. Remember the sun and the air analogy, or even we can use a light bulb in a room, right? The room does not stay lit after you turn the light switch off, because the air in the room does not sustain the light. It doesn't have any root. The air doesn't have any root in the light. So it is necessary for the light in the room to be sustained by the external source.
Yeah, the heaviness of your argument is following on the necessity of being able to be sustained, like how the light bulb is the thing that is sustaining the light. I don't believe that the universe is like this. It's not analogous, because I say that the universe is more like the watchmaker or the builder, where they caused it. They're not sustaining it, but they caused it, and it's able to sustain itself for a fixed amount of time or for a finite amount of time, and then it's eventually going to decay into nothingness, and it's no longer going to exist. And I just feel the need to restate my premise again. I don't see the universe as like the light in the light bulb. It's not essential. It is non-essential, and therefore not a necessity.
This is exactly the issue, because the builder analogy only works if God doesn't create ex nihilo. Did God in your system create from pre-existing matter? Or did he create from nothing?
I don't know. I'm agnostic on that. I don't know how God created the universe. It's just whatever he did, he did.
So ultimately,
just under 10 minutes left.
All right. Thank you, Taco. In previous conversations, you've alluded to the idea that God has created ex nihilo.
Yeah, God would be the uncaused cause, because an uncaused cause is necessary for the universe to exist.
Okay, so if God creates ex nihilo, then that means the things that he has created are necessary for him to have created them. He is the necessary sustainer of the things created.
Again, you keep on trying to push the word sustain. Sustain isn't the topic of conversation. It's whether it's necessary for him to be relational, and you're trying to assert that being able to sustain means that it must be relational. And again, I don't see the universe as the light bulb and the light. I see the universe as more like the builder and the building.
But that, unfortunately, is sustaining is the topic of the conversation. I outlined in my opening statement exactly how it applies, and the course of the debate that I was going to be taking us down, and there weren't any objections up until this point.
Yeah, and because I've been willing to hear you out up to this point as to why sustaining would be necessary. And I've heard you at this point. It's
Well,
that you believe
we are
that.
debating deism. We are debating your deistic worldview. Like I said, I'm taking the affirmative stance against your deistic worldview. And
Yeah.
like I said on the face of the debate at the very front in my opening, that I wasn't debating divine revelation. I wasn't debating tag. And the problem that I'm debating here is that in a deistic worldview, God creates it and then leaves it. He does not sustain it.
Right. It's not necessary for him to sustain it. And that's really where the brick wall is here, where the misunderstanding is here. It's God sustaining his creation is not necessary because the universe could fall apart, as I've said a few times. And that's totally possible. All that means is that like the universe that he created was not sustainable.
Again, it is necessary because remember, you've already conceded every effect has its cause. Every effect is dependent upon its cause. And God is sustaining existence itself.
Yeah, every effect is dependent on its cause in order for that effect to exist, not to be sustained. It's the universe was caused by God, but it's not necessary for that cause to be sustained in order for the fact that it was still created. And
You just said it's necessary for it to exist. That's sustaining.
To exist, not to continue existing.
To
forever.
exist at all. Because remember, the only reason it ceases to exist is because the sustaining ceases. Not because there was a built-in predetermined point at which it would not exist. A cause does not cause a non-effect.
Okay. It's the build, and this is why I'll say maybe a fourth or a fifth time, and it's that the universe is not like the universe is the builder and the building. The builder does not need to sustain the building. The building can just exist and sustain itself on its own. And that's where there's still a disconnect here somehow. And I think that you just don't agree, and that's why you keep pressing me on this issue.
Well, that's exactly the issue, because remember, the builder analogy only works if God doesn't create ex nihilo.
Sure. Well, in the case, that's where the God creating the universe is different than the builder creating the building. Because, yeah, right. It is also not at the same time, because I don't know what the method of creation was for God. If he really did create ex nihilo, maybe he did. I don't know. But
when I pressed you on it, you did concede to that. You said he's the uncaused cause.
Yeah, the uncaused necessary. Yep, the uncaused necessary cause of the universe. I believe that the universe did have a starting point at some point, and there had to be something that caused it, but nothing existed at the same time. So what caused it? I believe it was God.
If God only started the becoming of the universe and not the being of the universe, it means that the form already existed before the becoming.
Not exactly. All it means is that the existence could eventually evaporate into nothingness eventually, and it just could sustain itself for a finite period of time.
Just under 5 minutes?
It would mean that the universe is also an uncaused cause in your worldview.
I still don't see how it's necessary for God to sustain his creation. I think we're just where we're at the impasse is you believe that universe is like the light bulb and the light. I believe that the universe is like the watch and the watchmaker.
But again, the watch and watchmaker analogy, the fire and the water, the builder and the building, all of that is only relevant if God did not create ex nihilo. So either the only options we have here, there's no third option here. The only options we have are God created from nothing, or he created with a pre-existing substance. God is the uncaused cause, uncaused himself into a pre-existing toy box full of the materials he needed to create the things. Because remember, this is not just about the becoming, and it's about the sustaining of the being as well. God is not just the source of the becoming, but the being itself. Remember, would you say that God is the source of all being? Be by virtue of being the creator. You say that?
Define being.
The form or the essence of a thing.
The cause of the being is what you're saying?
Existence.
I believe that God is the cause under that definition. God is the cause of all being, yes.
So, God, necessarily being the cause of all being, didn't come into universe, didn't come into existence. He didn't cause himself concurrently with the universe, right? The universe is the creation, correct?
Right, the universe is the creation.
Ergo, every effect has its cause. Every effect is dependent upon its cause. Even if you want to try and take an indirect route and state something to the effect of God created the universe with a sustaining principle, like I said earlier a couple times, it just kicks the can down the road because that sustaining principle is not God itself. It doesn't self-exist. It's not the necessary uncaused cause itself. Its existence also depends on the creative action of the God. And remember, it's logically incoherent. It's a contradiction to state that God can create a thing that was not created by him. God cannot cause a thing to exist that wasn't caused by him.
This is where I think that you're really trying to do what you've accused me of in the past and trying to pigeonhole me into this belief, into something that I don't actually believe in. I don't believe that God is necessary in order to sustain his creation. God necessarily has to sustain his own creation. And I feel like I've had to say this way too many times, and you're trying to do the very thing which you've accused me of doing in the past. I don't believe this, but you're really, 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 really trying to assert it because it's what you believe. And if I did believe it, then it would disprove deism, but I don't.
Well, God and the universe are in a hierarchical causal chain. That means that it simultaneously depends on him, and he is the source of the existence of the universe itself. And again, just because you don't believe that God is the sustainer, it doesn't actually resolve the logical entailments that I've outlined, such as non-contradiction, the dependency, the argument from contingency. I've given a fully fleshed out argument, and that you aren't just stating it.
I still fail to see the logical contradiction, which requires sustainment or entailment. And I don't think it's a matter of my own misunderstanding at this point.
Well, like I've said, you've acknowledged that God is the source of all being. You've acknowledged that he is...
Hang on, that's time.
Awesome.
Go ahead and finish up your statement, and then we'll move on to the next one.
All right. Well, you've acknowledged that God is the source of all being. You've acknowledged that he created ex nihilo. You've acknowledged that logic is objective. Well, we reiterated a couple times, but I'm just finishing my statement here. We have acknowledged that you believe that logic is objective. So things like the law of non-contradiction, the argument from contingency, all of the entailments with objective logic would be necessary in and of themselves. Ultimately, it just seems like either you don't really subscribe to deism, or you're just not familiar with the underlying logical baggage that is necessary for the arguments themselves.
Okay, and we'll be moving into the cross-exam for Bubba, the cross-exam for Bubba now. Once again, let's be polite to each other. Bubba, you're in control of your cross-exam. Sapphire, please do your best to respond directly and concisely to his questions. Bubba, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your timer.
Yep, I'm ready. 3, 2, 1, go.
Starting your timer now. You have 30 minutes.
All right, Sapphire, so I define something as necessary to be something that must be the way that it is. Do you agree?
Yeah, I have no problem with necessary. Yeah, necessary is the common definition.
So I believe that a rational being is a being which you can have a relationship with. Do you agree?
Not necessarily. You
What do you
can.
say?
It's possible. But in terms of, as far as your question goes, I mean, I guess I could just let you follow up, but
No, I want to
I'm
use
trying to preempt it.
No, I want to use your definitions for what you define. But I only have 3 terms to define, and I
Well,
want to
you
know.
asked if it's if it can be, if it's possible to have a relationship with a rational being, which I would argue is yes. I mean, we do it all the time. There's all sorts of possible relationships that we have and don't have. You know, I could become friends with someone tomorrow that I've never met. They're a rational agent. It's possible that could happen. It's possible that couldn't happen.
And yeah, I just say, like, would you say that a being which is relational means that you have the ability to have a relationship with it?
No, I not necessarily. Like, in one sense, relational would mean relationship, but
Yeah.
relation, in terms of how I've been implying it, is it's a type of fact. It's either true or false of 2 things. The relations connect distinct entities, and they involve the 3 critical components of the subject, the term, and the foundation. So it's not necessarily about interpersonal relation in that sense. A relation is that which connects the distinct entities in the way that I'm employing it.
Yes, the relationship. I just need a definitive definition to work with for relational being.
Yeah, so when I say that God is relational, I'm saying that God is connected to as a distinct entity to us, or the creation as another distinct entity. Not necessarily that God is, I'm not employing it in the sense, for the purposes of this argument, that me and God are buds or besties, and that we go get mimosas on Saturday, right? Relation is a correlative. So, for example, creator and creation is an example of a relation. It's not necessarily a relationship, but it's a relation in terms of the philosophical sense that I'm employing the term.
What would a personal being be then? What is a being which is personal?
A being that's personal would be a being that has personhood. So not necessarily personal in the sense of, like, this is my personal can of Monster drink. That would denote ownership. That's a sense in which we could use the term, but the sense in which I employ personal being in terms of God, I'm arguing that God has personhood.
And just here, real quick, define personhood, and then I can make a point and move on to the next set of questions.
So he's conscious with a will and an intention. A being that is a person is an individual it's an individual subsistence of rational nature. So a being, like I said, that has will, desires, personhood.
Okay, so what we're saying then, your claim in this debate is going to be that it is necessary, it must be the case that God is a being which can connect to other distinct entities and has personhood, which means as a being which is conscious with a will and intention and rational nature. Right?
Yeah, just reiterating what we've covered so far, yeah.
Yep. And so, you heard me say in my intro when I iterated it in the cross-exam from your end, that I believe that what is necessary for a creator to create its creation is that it has to have a conscious mind and it has to have the ability to create. In other words, the watchmaker and the watchmaker has to have the knowledge to create the watch, and it has to have the ability to create the watch. And so I would say, what do you consider to be necessary for a creator to create a creation?
Those same sorts of qualities would be necessary logically, the foreknowledge, the will, the intellect, like you've said. The God would have to be rational. The God would have to have not just the knowledge of how to produce or the thing produced, but he would also have to have the desire to produce the thing.
Okay, cool. So everything I stated then, is there anything that you would add to the ability to create and the knowledge of how to create?
Not as far as you've asked up to this point, man.
Okay, cool. Then I want to move to how you understand God to be, or into the Christian God. And I promise that this is relevant. It's like, do you believe that God is all powerful?
Well, unfortunately, I don't see what this has to do
I'll get
with
to
the
it.
argument as I've laid out in my opening statement or in my cross-examination.
Yep, I'm promising you that it'll be relevant.
Sure. Yeah, God is all-powerful.
Okay, how do you know that and why?
Well, God, in the sense that him being all-powerful, has the power to do all things which are possible. He's not lacking in the ability to do those things that are logically possible. It's not like God can create a boulder that's too big for him to lift, because that would be logically incoherent.
I know. I'm saying, how do you know these things? How do you know that and why?
Well, I'm not doing a precept. I'm doing.
I know. Neither am I.
Against deism. I'm arguing against deism.
I know. I'm arguing against theism right now, and I'm saying, how do you know that God is all powerful, and how do you know that?
Well, again, Bubba, I'm just trying to stay here. Like I've said at the beginning, I'm not arguing personal revelation. I mean, I preempted this entire line. It feels like when I said that I'm not arguing miracles, I'm not arguing prayer, I'm not arguing divine revelation. I said all those things in my and just like you acknowledged in your opening statement, you said that those would be the way that I would have the knowledge of the God. You've already acknowledged that, but I've already said that I'm not. I haven't proposed those sorts of arguments.
I know, and I think is everyone who's in the audience right now, including me and Taco, knows that you're an Eastern Orthodox Christian. So when I promise you that when I'm asking you what you believe about God's nature, such as his all-powerfulness, his all-knowingness, his triune nature, I'm promising you that it's going to be relevant in like 2 or 3 minutes if you just answer directly. So okay. How do you know that God is all-powerful?
Well, if God is the source of all being, and the source of all being, then the source of all being has to be able to do whatever is logically possible. Power is the ability to actualize potential. That is, to bring something into being or to sustain something in being. You have finite power. Limited beings can only actualize certain potentials. Builder can build a house, but he cannot create life. Right? You have infinite power. A being with infinite or unlimited power can actualize any potential that is logically possible. So if something is the source of all being, it must have the power to actualize all things that exist. If it lacked power over some aspect of reality, it could not be the cause of that aspect, which would contradict its status as the source of all being.
I just need a real quick, you say that it is logically necessary for God to be all-powerful because he has the ability to create creation.
Well, I'm trying to stick within the confines of the debate as far as what we've discussed and the arguments that I've actually made. The reason why I'm keeping it tight is that
Sapphire,
it's logically necessary for God to be all-powerful if he is the source of all being, which is the
Sapphire, I didn't question any of your questions when you were questioning me. So if you cannot do the same, if you cannot do that for me, and
if I'm questioning, I'm only just trying to, if I'm just, if I'm questioning, I'm only trying to clarify. And just let me answer.
Okay. I'm letting you answer, but you're not answering. So, and the next thing is just like I asked you about how do you know that he's all powerful? How do you know that he's all knowing?
Because
because it's logically
necessary for God to be all powerful if he's the source of all being?
What makes it logically necessary?
Well, power is the ability to actualize potential. If to bring something into being or to sustain something in being, for example, a being of unlimited power like God being all powerful, sorry, excuse me for a second. A being with unlimited power can actualize any potential that is logically possible. So again, it's a logical necessity. That's the argument that I'm making here. And how I know is precept. How I have access to knowledge in the first place is not really the form or the function of the structure of the debate. We're debating deism and theism and whether or not God is relational.
Yep, my next 2 or 3 questions are going to really make clear to you, I hope, as to why I'm asking you these questions. How do you know that God is a Trinity?
Well, I just don't see what the point of asking about the Trinity
Stop questioning my questions. Just answer them, please.
I am answering them. Like I said, the only reason I would be asking questions is to get a firmer grasp on where you're coming from.
Just go ahead and respond directly.
Why is it necessary for God to be a Trinity?
No, how do you know that God is a Trinity?
I'm on the affirmative here. You're on the negative.
I know. I'm saying to you, and I may ask Taco for some time back, because I'm telling you, I promise that this is going to be relevant in like another question or two, and you keep questioning my questions. So please, just like, how do you know that God is a Trinity?
I don't believe that's necessary.
You don't believe it's necessary for God to be a Trinity? Okay. So don't believe it's necessary in order for him to create the universe, right?
Now, we've already acknowledged what my necessary beliefs are.
They're that he has to be all-powerful, he has to be all-knowing.
And it's not because I don't believe that God is a Trinity, but the Trinity is revelational knowledge, which I stated at the beginning of my opening statement, I'm not discussing.
And if I ask you questions about if I ask you that if you're getting all this information because you rationalize it, then
no,
you kind of have to answer that question.
The Trinity is not something we rationalize to. It's revealed knowledge.
Okay, revealed knowledge from where?
Obviously from my God.
Cool. Well, we'll get into that next. And then final question, is God relational, and how do you know?
But I'm not arguing for revealed knowledge.
You're arguing for whether or not God is relational.
Yes, and relations are, as I've defined earlier, not relation as you are trying to either get me to define or trying to switch the definition to. When you asked me at the very beginning of this cross-referencing,
Sapphire, you're filibustering too much. Please.
I'm not filibustering.
Please directly answer.
Insofar as I have defined a relation as connecting distinct entities, yes, it's necessary that God, being the creator, is relational to the creation. Insofar as I have defined it for the purpose of this debate, not as however you would like me to have defined it.
Right. And is it necessary that God must have all these qualities, except for the Trinity, because you concede on that? So is it necessary that God must have these qualities in order to create the universe?
Yes, it's logically necessary for God to be all-powerful if he is the source of all being, yeah.
And how is that information revealed to you?
Well, much in the same way that information has been revealed to you, apart from, like I've said, the things I'm not debating. I'm not here. I'm not proposing.
Sure. If you're going to say that it's in the same way that I would have that knowledge revealed to me, I say it's through my own personal revelation. Do you say the same thing?
Again, I've already defined personal, so I don't know how you're employing the term if you're using it the same way that I've defined it.
I'm employing the term like this because what me and you both have is a theory. A theory that says that God created the universe. And in order for a theory to gain more utility is that how much information it provides about the universe and the variety of explanatory scope about reality. What it seems like to me is that you've taken deism and sort of tacked on these other qualities of God, which provide no explanatory scope, no new information about the universe, and doesn't answer any of the question that deism doesn't already answer, as per the term necessity.
No,
The only reason that it seems to me that you've added these questions or added these qualities onto God is because it fits your Christian paradigm to say that God is all powerfulness, all knowingness, the Trinity, which you say it's not even necessary. So I'm curious if you can.
You're the one that proposed the Trinity, bro. I didn't say the Trinity in any of my arguments.
I asked you about the Trinity, and you said you don't believe that is necessary. So I'm curious as if you could provide any one of those things which I just said with the theory that God is relational.
The only thing that I said that would be necessary is that his personhood, being that he is a conscious mind with a will and an intellect, and that he's all powerful, meaning that he has the ability to actualize all things that are logically possible. Those are the things that I've stated are necessary for the God.
And I want to see if you're listening. What was the question I just asked you?
I don't know.
I said, can you provide any explanatory scope or new information that's revealed about the universe because of these qualities? Because God is all powerful, it reveals this about the universe.
Actually, yeah, because like I said in my earlier argument, dude, I don't think you understand, based on from your deistic worldview, the logical entailments that are involved with the system. So what I can provide as far as like with utility, and I don't believe utility is fully described as how you've narrowly defined it. I think utility is, perfectly.
I haven't defined utility.
I think, yeah, you did.
No, I didn't. I said that in order for a theory to maintain utility, it would have a couple of these things.
Okay, so again, I don't think that I don't really subscribe to your issue here. I don't understand like what your problem is as far as keeping things within the scope of the debate. Arguing with the arguments that I've actually made rather than trying to.
So it sounds like he's trying to build an argument. Go ahead and respond to his questions, right?
Here. I can provide as to what I just said and why it's relevant. I said that Sapphire seems to have taken deism, the necessary qualities of God, and tacked on these new qualities unto God, such as him being relational, the point of the debate. You've tacked on this quality that is not necessary, doesn't provide any new explanatory scope about knowledge of the universe. And okay, then that's the question, and that is the question that I'm asking you. What is the explanatory scope of saying that God is relational, or is necessary for him to be relational?
Because like I've said, I argued that God is the sustainer. I have argued from the entire time that it's necessary for God to be relational. I've argued in terms, again, I'll just remind you of my definition. The relation is to be understood.
I remember it. You don't need to rehash your definitions. I just need you to answer.
Okay, again, so what exactly hasn't been answered to your satisfaction here, bro?
So far, what you've said is that it's necessary for God to sustain the universe because you view the universe in the analogy of like the light in the light bulb. And I reject that. Because
it's
I said that
logically
the universe
necessary for him to have these qualities. You understand that? Like but no, hold on. You said logic was objective.
And we're not going back. You should have asked me that in the cross-examine, which you did actually. And I responded, and I responded, and then that means that this question has been asked and answered.
So stick to it.
And I have been very consistent. I believe that the universe is like the watch and the watchmaker, the builder and the building. You believe that the universe is like the light in the light bulb. Those things
don't hold up logically.
You believe that the universe is like the light in the light bulb,
which is logically coherent.
But it doesn't provide any new explanatory scope about the universe.
I explained why the builder and the builder is false.
That deism. You said because it's necessary for God to sustain His creation, and I reject that premise from the beginning.
No, you didn't reject the premise. You said every effect has its cause, and every effect has its cause, and every effect is dependent upon its cause. You didn't reject anything needing to be sustained. You're just ignoring the logical entailments of your own argument.
So this is good stuff for you to bring up in the conclusion, but right now he's asking the questions.
Okay, and we can.
And I'm answering them.
I haven't asked you a question in like the last 5 minutes. I made a promise in my intro, and I want to see if I can fulfill that promise. Sapphire, what kind of revelation do you use to establish truth about reality?
There's multitudes of truth that multitudes of methods I use to establish truth about reality.
Yep. What type of revelation do you use?
Use divine revelation, my personal sense perception, my experiences, and again, all of the arguments that I've posited, I use logic and reason, but all the arguments that I've posited up to this point are not being contended with.
Do you remember what I said in my intro about me using circular reasoning?
It's funny that you're running from the arguments that have been posited.
You are not making arguments.
Create an argument.
You're not making arguments. I'm asking you questions. How do you know that this revelation that you received, personal and divine, is trustworthy?
Now, are you cross-examining my arguments? Or are
Stop
you
asking me questions, Sapphire. Answer mine. How do you know that this revelation that was given to you is trustworthy?
Much like you would say, because I believe in my trustworthiness. I believe in my sense perception. I don't believe I'm deluded or whatever. It's recursion, dude.
And then your logic is circular based on faith, just like mine.
And
so what you
so
just
we're on the same level?
What you've conceded to is that your worldview on theism provides no explanatory scope that deism doesn't. Me and you are on you're right, on the same level. And this is where I'm going to make my final statement. This is where I'm going to make my final statement and concede the rest of my time, because what Sapphire's just admitted by saying that his logic is circular just like mine, he has faith in his trustworthy sense perception, is that we are in the same boat, as he just said.
In order to doubt,
I'm making my final. I conceded my time, Sapphire. This is where you stop talking, and I just make my final statement.
I'm answering the question you asked.
I'm not answering. I'm not asking you a question.
You did. You asked me. You asked me how.
Sapphire, this is Bubba's cross-exam.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't asked you a question.
It is his prior question. It is the answer to his prior question. But
the last question that I asked you is, how do you know that this revelation is trustworthy?
Yeah.
After you answered, I conceded the rest of my time, and I'm making final statements now.
In order to doubt that my mind maps onto reality, I have to assume that to be the case.
And what you've just admitted is that you have no more explanatory scope than I do. You both trust in your knowledge because it's trustworthy, and me and you are in the same boat. And if your faith in God gives you trustworthy sense perception, just like my own, it's on the same level as mine. And
that's not all I said.
There's nothing about your theory of theism that provides any more explanatory scope than mine, and there's nothing else to say at that point.
And you're conceding the rest of your time now, you said, right?
Yeah, I am just curious. Gotcha. How much time do I have left?
6.5 minutes.
Oh yeah, I'm done.
All right, cool. All right, we'll go ahead and move into the conclusions. Hopefully you guys got some ammo for your conclusions. You'll have 5 minutes each. We're going to start with the affirmative and close with the negative. Second closing is going to be the negative. Sapphire, whenever you're ready, let me know, and I'll start your 5-minute timer.
Yeah, I'm ready.
You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, so in closing, I'd just like to say that Bubba never really engaged with any of the previous arguments that I gave in my opening statement or answered any of my objections. Now, I'm not sure whether it was just a matter of personal misunderstanding or not, but Bubba in his cross-examination, instead of trying to make arguments against my actual points of contention, he engaged with stuff that didn't have any correlation to the debate and to the topic. Bubba has an unwillingness, and you can see this if you go through his cross-exam with me, to answer or to respond to any of my arguments. He asked a bunch of questions that were completely irrelevant. He asked about the Trinity. He asked me about relationality, but he never engaged with my argument that I presented in my opening statement whatsoever, which I honestly expected him to do. Ultimately, Bubba's contentions about, if God existed, we would see more evidence of him existing, interacting with the world. We'd have more Jesuses or more divine manifestations. That's really just him being personally upset that God is not a monkey on a street corner dancing for coins, that God is not a gumball machine that reliably and consistently responds to the quarters that you put into it and turn the crank. God does not interact with Bubba in the means and through the means and in the manner that he personally desires. So he finds it easier to reject God. The other problem that I have with some of his other sentiments that were brought up in some of the question and answer segments are, he would explain people believing in God, people going to church, believing in God, being personal and interacting is because, and even though they might not see it, is because God works in mysterious ways. I would argue that the opposite could be the case, that people who believe in God are more likely to go to church, not that people who go to church are more likely to believe in God. The church teaches a sacramental or interactive theology. It teaches that God does, in fact, engage with his creation. And people who don't believe that are not likely to attend services. They're not likely to commune with those groups. And I would expect that to be normal. It doesn't. I don't think that Bubba's worldview has explanatory power. I don't think that it engages with the logical entailments of his position. I think that it's cobbled together, a Frankenstein philosophy that he is himself currently figuring out. And for him to say, I don't know this, I don't know that, I don't know this, I don't know that, and then tout that he has more explanatory power than any other worldview is silly on its face. But that's it.
Thank you for the conclusion. And then, Bubba, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your timer.
Yep, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right.
The reason that I say that I don't know for the record is because it's a more honest thing to do. But that's besides the point that I was going to make. It's more dishonest for Sapphire to say that he does know as to the reason as the state of the affairs are the way that it is. In order for a theory like the one that me and Sapphire are providing, God created the universe and he's relational, and God created the universe and he's not relational. In order to find out which theory provides the most utility, as I said earlier, would depend on the amount of information that it provides about the universe and the variety of explanatory scope about reality. Sapphire conceded that he believes, just like I do, that you have access to logic, knowledge, and reasoning because he has faith in his rationale and his empiricism. So that would mean that Sapphire has taken deism, the belief that God created the universe and nothing else, and tacked on all these other qualities such as being all-powerful, all-knowing, triune. That's my favorite part. He admitted that God being triune is not necessary for creation. None of these things are necessary for the universe to exist in the way that it exists. Sapphire played a heavy emphasis on the reason that God is relational is because it's necessary for him to sustain his creation. As much as Abysmo and Apophatic, and I think that was it, tried to pigeonhole me and say that I believe that the universe is like the light bulb and the light analogy. I don't, for the 100th fucking time. The universe is more analogous to the builder and the building. Sapphire has been trying to pigeonhole me into not believing in that for this entire debate. And the universe is self-sustaining as of right now, as far as we know, and it doesn't need a sustainer. It's unknown whether or not the universe is going to exist eternally or doesn't exist for a finite amount of time. We have scientific theories, but we don't know for certain. I say over and over again, I don't know whether or not the universe is going to sustain itself forever or not. But because Sapphire has added all of these unnecessary qualities onto God, he has created this worldview. He accuses me of having some fucking Frankenstein worldview, but he is the one who has unnecessary qualities onto God and has created this worldview which adds more problems than it answers, such as the issue of divine hiddenness. If he is relational, where the fuck is he? You can't point to God. You know you can't. You can't point back in time to Jesus. That is what is entailed, and such as the problem of evil as well. If God is the way you describe him, which you admitted, all powerful and all good and triune, then this is what is entailed by God being relational. It is not necessary for God to be relational. And what we didn't get to, unfortunately, was the fact that Sapphire outright lied when that dude came up and asked a question. When he said He said Sapphire lied by saying that I lied when I presented his own definition of relationality against him, and he didn't like it because I wrote down exactly what he said. I have all my notes, and we're going to go back in the video and find out whether or not I was lying. He said that relationality requires personhood, conscious mind, and the all power. Oh, excuse me, wrong definition. Now I look stupid. Relationality is I guess we'll just. Oh yeah, personhood, consciousness, and a mind, all powerful, and the ability to create. But still, it's like I guess that's the end of my time, and I'll just concede my conclusion. Like I said, that's all I got.
Gotcha. Thank you both of you for your time tonight. This was a fun debate. I hope everybody in the audience loved the debate.
Oh, what do you?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Did you have a question?
No, I didn't. Well, I was going to say, where's the after party? Where's the VC after party?
Yeah, for real. Oh, well, I was going to say, if
I have to go spend some time with
to...
my wife, but do you guys have a room you want to go into?
Yeah, I'll make a JT. I'll make a JTC.
I'll hop in there after I put my kids to bed.
So there's going to be a Join to Create channel on Politics Discord. I'd appreciate it if one of the mods on the YouTube could link the Discord, so anybody that wants to pop in there from YouTube hops in the Join to Create as well. It'll be at the bottom of the stage. If you're from Discord, file a mod mail. Just say, hey, I think you can get it when you join, but if you can't, just say, hey, in the mod mail, I'd like to join the Join to Create for the Bubba stage. I'm from the Taco YouTube or something, and they should be able to. I think it's ranked 2 or 3 or something, but it's not very high. But with that being said, I appreciate everybody being here for the debate. I did take a poll at who the winner was in the chat, but there's only 6 votes, so I'm not going to read it out.
Where is it? I'm looking.
Oh, it's on the YouTube. I would just.
Oh, YouTube.
But as always with taco debates, there's no winner or loser. Everybody wins. Everybody gets a participation trophy. We'll let the viewers decide in their mind who won and lost. That usually it's going to be biased one way or the other based on the people in the audience, and so
you either say that Bubba won or you're wrong.
I'm gonna print out the taco participation trophy and put it on my shelf.
But I appreciate everyone being here for the debate. Thank you so much, everybody, and both of y'all. Thank you for your time. If you guys enjoyed anything Bubba or Sapphire had to say, their links are in both a debate chat channel on the Discord right above this and in the YouTube description. Feel free to click that and subscribe to them. I appreciate everybody being here, like I said, and